guys, it's Kelly from SVG Sews. Welcome back to the channel and part 2 of Design a Stitchery in Silhouette Studio. Featured designer is Rivka Wilkins. You can find her graphics out on the Silhouette store or also on digiplayground.com. All the links will be in the accompanying blog post for this video. Hey, these shapes were super fun to play with. If you saw the first part of the video, then you learned how to edit them for Stitchery. The second part, I'm just going to give you some tips and tricks on how to put it together yourself. I hope you try it. It's with glitter HTV, hand stitching, wool applique, all sorts of fun, so stick around. Okay guys, so we're back in Silhouette Studio Designer Edition, and I wanted to just go over a few things, some tips about how to manage a project like this when you're doing a whole quilt. And I've talked about this in previous videos, but I just want to cover it again. So you always should save your files, and I save them to my library. And when I'm doing a project, I give them a very specific name. So all of my files are kind of grouped together. So with this, my featured designer series, so that's FDS, and then R. Wilkins for Rivka Wilkins is the designer, and then the different pieces that I need for each of the files. So I'm going to go ahead and save this to my library and save as to my library. And again, I would put in my name down below here, okay? So I just want to make sure that you guys know to do that because it will make your life much easier. So when I come out here to my library, and my screen has got a little bit of a higher contrast, so it's a little bit hard to see all the graphics, but here they are all grouped together so that I can see them. Okay, so that's my first tip. Let's get back into the files here. Now, breaking this down, let's go back to the actual design. So what I did, I think previously, what I showed you guys was just kind of the line sketch work of what I wanted to do. I hadn't bought my flannel fabric yet, and by the time I started working on my blocks, I decided how I wanted to border it, and I ended up adding a lot more snowflakes because I just can't get enough of my glitter HTV. So that's heat transfer vinyl for all you new folks out there. Glitter HTV is a heat applied vinyl that is very, very sparkly, and it's really, really fun to play with. And you can use it in your quilts, especially your wall hangings, the things that aren't going to be washed or not washed heavily or repeatedly. It holds up just fine. I've put it on sweatshirts where I do use it heavily, and it's been working out really, really good. So, all right, so this was pretty much the finished design. And in the previous video, I showed you how to make the shapes more simple. So let me just show you the blocks that I ended up doing. So here's block 1. Now, what's great about this is you do want to make sure that you put in your sewing line and your cut line. Now, these lines, guys, are guidelines, okay? That's why you want to make sure your piece of fabric is much bigger. At least a good 1/2 to 1 inch bigger than what your block is. So make sure it still fits onto your 12-inch mat. But why that is because I found that after I got done stitching, it definitely, even though it's hand stitching, it is going to morph your fabric a little bit. So while these are guidelines to remind me how big I wanted my blocks, I ended up cutting them with my rotary mat and cutter and rulers to make sure that I did get a perfect 10.5 inch block for this guy. And I did that with each one of the blocks, okay? It's amazing how much your blocks will distort once you have been, handling the fabric for hours on end, okay? All right, so this is the smaller blocks, and I'll just whip through these little guys. So these are my writing blocks, or the blocks that are going to use my pen attachment in my cutter, and that's with Silhouette, ScanNCut, or Cricut, that you can lay these blocks out and use your pen attachment to write out the blocks. We just happen to be in Silhouette for this particular tutorial, okay? And here is, I was able to get 2 blocks onto a 12-inch piece of fabric. But I wouldn't push it any more than this because, like I say, things do distort. You want to make sure you have enough room to get a good cutting of those blocks. Okay, now the next thing I want to talk about is, like I say, these are the writing, so with our pen, but then I also needed to create a cut file for my scarves and hats. Now I got actual traditional wool, not just craft felt, the thinner craft felt. So this is really thick wool that I used. So I used the freezer paper method. So basically I brought all of the scarves over here into a blank file, and I'm calling it the freezer FPS, so freezer paper for my scarves. And then I just loaded a Sharpie fine line pen and put the freezer paper face down, so waxy side down, paper side up, and then you draw this. So no flipping necessary for this because you're going to put this straight on top of your wall, okay? And then cut them out. So you put the freezer paper shiny side down onto the right side of your wall, okay? And then you just manually cut them out. And literally it only takes minutes, and it's worth not the headache of trying to dig wool out of my blade and all that good fun stuff. So this is the way I totally do it for all of my thicker pieces of fabric or hard to deal with pieces of fabric. Freezer paper to the rescue. Okay, so those are my tips for the files. Let's go on and I'll show you some tips about actually putting it together. Okay guys, so here's the freezer paper that I used, again, tracing with that Sharpie marker. Do you see those lines? That's because I didn't have my Sharpie marker loaded correctly. So if you have that happen to you when you use your sketch, or not your sketch pens, but any other non-silhouette pens, it's because it's not in there correctly. So get your popsicle stick out and make sure you adjust it. Okay guys, so here's a couple of the blocks. I did use the blue line eraser pen to mark all of my blocks because I know that it doesn't heat set, and I can get rid of it with water or with a blue line eraser fluid if I need to. Here's the big snowman, and these are the colors I chose to color in. I need to give him dimension and stand him out from that white fabric, and for the orange carrot noses. Now I did accidentally start stitching, but you can just lay it back down on your mat and start coloring again, and just use a couple layers of paper towel. Now again, I did this with silhouette, but look at that, I'm using a Cricut mat. I really like the Cricut mats with the silhouette. I know, it's just a touch of reality, but that's the way it is, and that's a finished block. So let's move on. Okay guys, so for the stitching, I wanted to go ahead and call out a couple of YouTube channels that I think you should go ahead and subscribe to because they're awesome. Quilt Roadies, this is Anna, and she goes lots of field trips and stuff, but she's really into wool. And where I got this whole inspiration to want to do this snowman quilt is because she had a tutorial on one of her recent videos, and I'll put a specific link to what that video was on that scarf stitch, how to make that fringe stitch. And so shout out to Anna. If you go and subscribe, comment and let her know that I sent you on over, that'd be awesome. Now the other channel that I want to make you guys aware of is Mary Corbett's Needle and Thread. She has got, I think, every single stitch known to man for embroidery, and so this is where you can learn if you want to do outline stitch or if you want to do stem stitch, you can follow along on her videos and she'll teach you how to do that. All right, so let's go back and look at the pictures, and I can call out where I did those different stitches. All right, so for the actual stitches, stem stitch for the body and the twigs and the facial features and the carrots. And then I used a buttonhole or whip stitch to go around the wool applique, the scarf stitch for the fringe, and then French knots for the eyes and for the different buttons. Okay, so I've gotten all my blocks done. I pressed them using my iron to get them, you know, nice and flattened out and squared up. And then now I have them on my design wall, and I'm testing out some fabrics to see for my borders. And you'll see this is actually the wrong design layout. I ended up putting that shorter snowman up to the top. So I have for design wall, guys, just a piece of flannel, an actual picnic tablecloth. And so that's great to whip up on the wall and use as a design wall. Okay guys, so just showing you, I did some swirl quilting. Now with your snowmen, you may need to do a little bit of quilting and go up into their bodies because you don't want it would look weird if you didn't do a little bit of quilting in those open spaces. You want to have even quilting. And I would recommend that you do all your quilting and then put your actual glitter HTV snowflakes on. And I started out with one batch and ended up cutting a whole nother batch because I just loved how it looked. So I'm super happy that you've watched part 2 of this Design a Stitchery in Silhouette Studio. Kind of gives you an overview of how to go ahead and put this together yourself. I would love to see your designs. If you would share them with me, please come and find me at Kelly Studiola on Instagram. svgsews.com is my website and shop, and you can join our SVGs for Quilters Facebook group. Come find us there. We've got a great group of folks that have all kinds of cutters. We're all just using them for our quilting and sewing. So come on over and find us. Thanks again for watching.